Today we are bringing you a spoiler-filled discussion for the first 5 books in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. So as long as you've read as far as Midnight Tides, or if you don't care about spoilers, then you'll be fine. This is my partner Sam, by the way. Sam is rereading this series. He's read it before. I'm reading it for the first time. So I thought it would be quite interesting to compare how we would rank the books in the series so far. We're also buddy reading this as well. So we've already had many discussions. So how would you rank the books so far?
So, because I'm rereading this series, I'm picking up on a few more things that I wasn't the first time round. So my ranking is probably different from when I first read this.
Yeah.
But if I were to rank them right now, I'd probably say, and this is probably the same as the first time I read it in terms of the least favourite book out of the first 5, which would be Gardens of the Moon.
Yeah, same for me.
4th would be Dead House Gates. 3rd would be Midnight Tides. 2nd would be House of Chains, and the 1st would be Memories of Ice.
Interesting, because yeah, like I said, my bottom at the moment would probably be Gardens of the Moon, followed by House of Chains, which is interesting that that's your second favourite. 3rd would probably be Dead House Gates. 2nd would be Memories of Ice, which is obviously your favourite. And then my favourite so far has been Midnight Tides, the last book we read. I think I just really loved the politics in Midnight Tides. What I find really interesting listening to other people's reviews and like reading reviews and stuff about Midnight Tides, I think some people struggle with middle book in the series. We're off to a different part of the world, different characters, a whole new set of characters, and it can feel a little bit jarring, is what I gather like some people's experience is. But for me, I loved that we were in a new part of the world, and yeah, it was a little bit difficult in the beginning to get your head around everything, but once we were into it, I liked that it was a closer story, and you know, we had these two sides kind of, you know, against each other, but I think the themes and the political intrigue and the characters as well, it was the first time in the series where I actually felt something for the characters. And Trull is just like one of my favourite characters. Bug and Tahal as well. It was the first time in the series where the humour was actually working for me, because you love the humour with the bridge burners. Yeah, the bridge burners for me, not just the bridge burners, but just the Marines, the ones in the trenches. The humour you get from them, the camaraderie, the banter, the back and forth. I think Erikson does that extremely well. And obviously we get that with Tahal and Bug. And I know that we have both read Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch, and the humour and that back and forth is very similar to those two characters. Yeah, it's interesting when you said that, because it hadn't occurred to me like until you pointed it out when we were reading it, and I was like, actually, like I think it's just duos though, like when you have an iconic duo in a fantasy, and you have that banter. No, but I would agree with you with Midnight Times. I think the themes in that book are very different to some of the other ones that we've seen. We get a lot more we get a lot more politicking, and we also, what I really loved about that book in particular was how different the two cultures were. We had one culture which was very capitalistic, on the extreme edge of capitalism, and I'm pretty sure Erikson was trying to draw similarities to our own culture, our own capitalistic instincts in some countries. But then I also loved during the whole war on Lether, and when they were at war, we get these warnings that Lether, that if the Eda actually won, that their society would probably be like insidiously infected by this capitalism, which has got such a hold on the Lether society. And I thought that was really interesting, and how they could be corrupted in that way, even if they won the war, they would eventually lose, because they would become like Lether. It's really interesting, because someone commented on one of my earlier videos, because I've talked a lot about how I struggle sometimes with Stephen Erikson's character writing, and someone commented on one of my videos that what they found helped them was to look at characters as representatives of the different like cultures and societies and the different groups of people. And I think I saw that quite a lot with Midnight Tides, where we had the Lethari and we had the Tista. I thought that the detail that Stephen Erikson put into developing the Tista culture. That was so interesting.
Yeah, and we got that right from the get-go, in terms of how their culture is and how their society is structured, which I thought was really interesting. Just the little moments where I think there was an example of where Trull was running to tell the family some really important news about the fact that the Lether are within their territory. And he's running back and he steps in basically the council that's happening with his father and the higher ups. Instead of like interrupting, he puts his hand on the pommel of his sword to note that he's got something important to say. Just moments like that I think are really, really, really good. And it's obviously you see Erikson putting that effort into writing these cultures and these fleshed out societies.
And when Udinaz with Rulad after his first death, like that whole scene with preparing the body, everything to do with that, like I think that you could just see the detail, and that's what I love like with fantasy. Like, you know me, I'm a big world building reader and I love learning about the different cultures, and I think the different cultures in the Malazan universe are so distinct, and I think that's what was lacking for me with Gardens of the Moon, because I think out of all of the different cultures, the different areas of the world that we visited, Genabakis is the one place where I don't really have a grasp on the culture. It just feels very one note to me, very generic. And we did see it develop a little more with Memories of Ice, and again I think that's why I liked Memories of Ice, because we started off way back in the past. We were learning about the Kachain Chamale and seeing kind of like, again, like feeling the depth of the world, and following on from Deadhouse Gates where we had everything to do with Seven Cities and how it's this really ancient land, all of this history, you know, learning all the stuff about the First Empire. And there was a scene with, I'm going off on like way too many tangents, but there was a scene, there was a scene, because it all comes full circle. And even with Deadhouse Gates, we learn about the First Empire. There's that scene where Heboric and Felasin and Culp, they go into, you know, this place where they see this failed ritual, and even, you know, how that we almost revisit it again
and that's what Erikson does really well. He just links from like books ago events, especially in this book in Midnight Tides. You learn some bits of information about this First Empire. It's fleshed out by, you know, Onrak and Trull in the fourth book, where they're talking about the statues and they're talking about the Emperor Decembaculus, or however you pronounce his name, and they touch upon the ritual, but it's not in any way info dumpy the way that Erikson does it. He just gives you bits of information. Yes, sometimes it's difficult to know which bits of information will play a part or more important or will add on when the books go on. But I know that what I really liked about book 5 is there was a link to book 3 when Ganos Paran, when he was learning about his powers, he jumped into one of the Azath houses. He teleported there, or his mind teleported there, and he was within the holds, and that was like the first time we'd even heard of holds. And he went up to I think it was the Throne of Shadow. There was that voice that was talking into his head about how they're assailed on the island of Drifter Valley, and how they're reaching out for Anamanda Rake for help, and they basically talk about this emperor on a distant land, one that's died 100 or 1,000 times, and he's the deliverer of Midnight Tides. And it's the fact that was in book 3, and we're now like nearly 2,000 pages on, and now we know that that's this character that we've been with through this whole book. And I'm not sure if I picked that up the first time I read it, but I just felt like it was just really cool reading that this time round. I just can't remember if I managed to pick up on it the first time.
See, it's really interesting, like all the connections, because one thing that made me feel like just like a little bit of a nerd, but when we were reading book 4, so start of House of Chains with Karsa, and he's in the Nason, and we see him on the ship where there's
Salander.
the Salander. I always forget the name of it, but he's on the ship, and I'm like, I recognise this scene. This is the same boat from the second book. And so I went back to the second book and I was reading that section, and there's a group of Tilanai Mas who show up, and they mention the crippled god. They say, oh, you're in league with the crippled god. And at the time, we hadn't actually heard of, well, I hadn't heard of the crippled god, because for me, he wasn't a prominent figure until the third book. And so I just did not register that bit of speech at all. And it wasn't until I went back, because we got to book 4, and I was thinking, oh, you know, I recognise this scene. I went back and read it, and I saw that line, and I thought, wow, so this has been foreshadowed.
There is
from
the start. Yeah, it's a series. I've never read a series with the amount of foreshadowing that Erikson does in his books. And I feel like it's just so rewarding when you pick up on it. And even in my first read, I didn't pick up on everything, and I still felt incredibly rewarded when I was reading these books, like, you know, from the second half onwards. Even the fourth book, like you said, with that ship that Castle was on. I'm pretty sure there's still probably more stuff which is going to come up about that. But also, like, the renegade Tilanai Mas from what Carcer believes are his gods are the ones that those Imas are hunting. You know, I just felt that was really, really cool.
It's so interesting how that moment keeps coming up over and over again, even in Midnight Tides, because we knew that Trull, the first time we see him, he's in the Nason and he's been shorn. So I knew that at some point it was going to be referenced, and then they talk about flooding. Well, they don't have the word for warrens. They
don't know what it is.
But they talk about making it easier for them to travel through, you know, these different realms. Again, that links back to, we knew that the Nason was a flooded warren.
And it's one of these intersections which Erikson has, where during, like, the timeline, all of these characters kind of seem to come across it. So you've got, like, Felisin, Bowdin, Cult, Heberick, all on this ship. You've got Gesler, Stormy, Truth, all on this ship. You've got Carcer. I even forget his name, the one that helps him out.
I know who you mean,
I think he's related to one of the guys in Darujistan. I just can't remember his name. But I just feel like that's just a really cool moment where we just keep on coming back to this bit, which shares so much history with all the characters that we've had POVs on across all these 5 books so far. I think that's really cool.
It's really rewarding, because there's so many moments throughout the series where something will happen, like in the 4th book, when Lestara and Pearl, they come across that dragon that's, like, trapped in its own warren, and that moment was just like a like,
there are absolutely certain moments where,
but you know it's going to come up again.
As a reader, you just got to trust at this point that Erikson knows what he's doing, and that's just not. It's not just a random dragon crucified on a cross.
But it feels random.
It feels random, but it won't be. But Erikson does do that again. Even that dragon has technically semi come up already.
Which you've picked up on.
Which I've picked up on. But that's so. That's only because we went through detail on the...
you drew me a whole diagram of the dragons.
I drew you a whole diagram of the dragons.
Because I was, like, so confused.
The family structure of all of these dragons, half ascendants,
because it kept
soul
mentioning
taken.
Tiam, and I was like, is that Mother Dark? No.
Yeah.
No. Because I keep, like, thinking that all of the Tistandi are dragons, and that's not actually the case.
No, the Tistandi are not all dragons. No. They're soul taken because I believe that they've drank upon the blood of Tiam, or at least Anamanda Rake has. But that
and it
probably
explains that
others.
in the last book.
And it explains that in the last book. And Tiam is the mother to certain half dragons, I would say, because they're half Tistadur, half Tistandi, as well as Starvold Demlane, which I think is the Warren, the first Warren. But even like for me, I don't know if Erikson like wants you to do this, but when you get all of the moments where they're doing the Deck of Dragon readings, and when Featherrich is like talking about the holds, and she's going through all of these different roles within the holds, within the warrens, within the houses, I'm trying to look back and think, okay, what could this mean? Who could this be? And that does give you indicators on where the story is going. But there was a lot in in Midnight Tides,
Yeah.
which I was able to pick up on more than previous books, because I feel like some of the terminology with the houses in the deck of dragons, like the orb, the stone, and stuff like that, I feel like I was lost with them even the second time round. But with Feather Witch's readings, I was able to catch on not all of them, but quite a few of them, which I felt was, again, really rewarding.
Yeah.
I don't know if I managed to do that first. This is the thing, I can't remember if I managed to do that the first time round, but I don't think it's like a spoiler. I think Erikson kind of wants you to go back and really kind of like go, right, who could this be?
Yeah, that's what I'm finding is he tells you, he just doesn't tell you. It's like, it's so interesting with the whole magic system and the Warrens and stuff. You get a little bit of information about them. Like, when I read the first book, all I could work out was, okay, well, a Warren seems to be a way of travelling from one place to the next, and also there are these mages and they're drawing on power from the Warren, but that was kind of the extent of it. But then we get to book 3 and we get an explanation around Cruel and how the Warrens are like his life force. And I was like, okay, well, that's giving me a bit more of a visual, and it's kind of explaining, you know, the crippled gods influence and, you know, how the Warrens are kind of like messed up because of, like, you know, you can kind of tie it together.
And if we're going along, let's talk about the magic system, because I know that you like a low level magic system with rules, with like a hard level. So I like them too, but I do appreciate what Eric's done with this magic system, because it is very high level and you're supposed to like draw your opinions on it. Nobody's got a particular power level necessarily. Erikson just kind of tells you that this character is powerful, because you know, we get it with Quick Ben. Like, there was that moment in Gardens of the Moon where you kind of just assume, or he kind of subverts that expectation, where you just think, okay, you've got a mage, he's got a Warren, he's able to draw on that Warren to utilise some power, and it comes in the form of certain things.
Yeah.
But then we get the moment at the end of Gardens of the Moon where Quick Ben draws on 6 or 7 Warrens at the same time. And I remember you, when you read that, you were just like, you can do that? And I'm just like, yep.
I feel like I've reached a point where I've stopped trying to work out power levels. I've stopped trying to, you know, I'm just
I don't think you just get the sense. Like, I think Erikson just wants you to get a sense of what these characters can do, not necessarily like a hard stricture on, okay, if you draw this person against this person's going to clearly win. I don't think that's what he wants to do, but I think it's only up until this book, Midnight Tides, where we get one of the Crimson Guard mages have that discussion with Seren in regards to Warrens, because obviously Seren and the people on this continent don't know anything about Warrens. No. And we get an actual, I think it's like one of the closest things
like a paragraph.
It's like the closest thing you've really seen Erikson do to an info dump, where you get that character, I forgot his name now, one of the Crimson Guard high mages. He just tells Seren, okay, this is how a Warren kind of works, and he creates like an analogy to how a river flows and things like that. But it's not necessarily just a place you can draw, you know, magic from, but a place where you can physically go. But depending on the Warren, that might not be the case.
Yeah. Because again, that's been quite confusing, because sometimes they'll travel through a Warren. Like, for example, the Imperial Warren. Yeah,
I'd say that the Imperial Warren is kind of like an anomaly.
Because that's one of the first Warrens that we see them travel through in the first book. But then we get the extra information in, I think it's Memories of Ice, where we find out that it was actually this land that was drawn into it.
Yeah, it was when Cruel, so I think it was when Calor destroyed the continent of Jackaroo. Is it Jackaroo? I can't remember the continent's name. But Cruel basically recreated it in that Warren, and that's what the Malazans use or call the Imperial Warren.
Because I picked that up. I picked up on that before you did, and you were
there was this moment in book 3 where Callum is looking down.
It's the end of book 2.
Is it book 2?
Yeah,
he's looking down on this trench, I think it is, and he sees Calor's insignia. I remember you going, oh, and I'm like, what? And then you told me, and I was like,
that was because you pointed that out, and then we were reading. It was the beginning of book 3, and when that whole scene with Cruel and Calla,
and it's just layers of bones and dust.
I felt so proud of myself.
You
did,
because even on my second reread, I didn't pick it up, but you did. But that's what I love about it. Like, even you can keep rereading this series and you're going to pick up on stuff.
Yeah.
Which I think is really impressive.
You said to me there's a point in one of the books where you've made a note on your phone because you don't want to spoil anything for me, but you've said that it's like a foreshadowing for one of the later books or something.
Oh, yeah. There was a moment in book 4, and I can't tell you about it because obviously we've not finished the series, but it's noted down on my phone, and it's just so small and insignificant, that moment. But I just remember reading it, and I'm just thinking, you got to be kidding me. That is absolutely crazy. And I think that all comes to fruition in like book 8 or 9, I think. But that moment right there, that's why I love this series. Just those moments.
Because it is your favourite series of all time.
It is my favourite series of all time, by a fair margin. Yeah.
It's interesting because we're halfway through the series now, and how long did it take you to read the series the first time?
I honestly don't know, because I was an idiot and I was reading Malazan and Wheel of Time at the same time.
Because you were reading, I think, Toll the Hounds when we met.
Yes.
That was 3 years ago.
I think so. But I was doing one Malazan book, one Wheel of Time book, like side by side.
And you wouldn't recommend doing that?
I wouldn't recommend doing it because I absolutely do think that if you want to read Malazan, you need to put all of your attention on that series. I agree with some people, like you, when you say like you need like a small break in between, like a month's break between books, just to, you know, decompress all of that information, all the characters and everything.
It's very intensive, and especially certain books. So I found this more with books 1, 2 and 5. Books 3 and 4, I think because they were continuing stories that began in earlier books, I found it a bit easier, quicker to get into them. Yeah. But I noticed it with Midnight Tides. I was like, whoa, this is a lot of information, and it's more information than my brain can handle. Like having that month in between. But I think if I were to leave it like 6 months, I wouldn't get as much of an enjoyment out of it because I would be forgetting stuff. Yeah,
and I think that's why I'm enjoying it this time round more so than the first time round, because obviously reading those Wheel of Time books in between, and Wheel of Time books, then it's not an easy read. There is a lot of history and a lot of lore and a lot of connecting the dots in that series, and to go from that book to Malazan to that it was a lot. Even though I absolutely loved the series at the end, I still think this time round I am enjoying it much more. Maybe because I'm not really reading like too difficult books in between, maybe just palate cleansers, but I think it's also the fact that I'm rereading this series, and again, like we talked about, I'm picking up on so much more stuff.
I think I wouldn't be enjoying the series as much if I wasn't reading it with you, and if we weren't, talking about it regularly. Not just because you like spoon feed me stuff, but I think it's just really helpful to have someone to like bounce theories off. Like sometimes I'll come across something and I'll think, hang on a minute, does this mean this? And it's like, obviously it's nice to have someone to talk about it with, and I know that there's resources like on Reddit and things like that, but because usually when I'm filming my reading vlogs for each book, I don't watch any other content or read like reviews because I don't want to influence like how I'm feeling. But then afterwards, once I've wrapped up the video, that's it. Like, so it's nice to have you to talk about it with.
Yeah, and
I don't want to be completely lost.
From my point of view, it is difficult because obviously I'm rereading it, you're reading it the first time. It's very difficult to draw the line between what I can say, which would verge on spoilers, to not. And that's been really, really difficult. But
I think you do a good job, because I think there's a difference between saying a spoiler and pointing out stuff in the text and saying, what do you think this means? Or like, file this away. For like,
I would say, I think that's probably my most used term this whole video.
File it away.
Just file it away. Just keep filing it away, Keep making those notes. But
I think my most used term is, I'm confused.
Probably.
Shall we talk about some characters? So we've talked about, you obviously really love the Bridge Burners. Who, if you had to pick, say like 3 to 5 favourite characters, who would you pick? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
I would say Fiddler, without a doubt.
I love Fiddler.
I think Fiddler is an amazing character. I think Trull, and I know you love Trull as well.
Trull's my favourite character.
Tehol and Bug, equally.
Yeah.
I think that duo is incredible. Tavor.
Interesting.
Yep.
You're saying that though as someone who's finished the series.
I'm saying that as somebody
I've
who's
only seen
finished
her
the series,
briefly, and we've only seen her from other people's perspectives.
Yeah.
And so she's shrouded in mystery. And all through book 4, House of Chains, I was thinking something. Oh, I can't quite get a grasp on her character.
No, and I don't think you're supposed to, because we've talked about the character writing and how I know I enjoy the character writing much more than you, and I think that's one of the things which is stopping you from rating this series as highly as me. I think.
Yeah, I think because it feels very ambiguous is the word I use. I feel like Stephen Erickson gives you like details about a character, or you see them go through a situation and you briefly see how they feel about it, but then I think Stephen Erickson expects you to extrapolate and to theorize on, okay, like, so if I were in this situation, how would I feel? Or based on context clues, what do I think this character is going to do next? And I think I struggle with that. I don't mind like theorizing when it comes to plot, world building, but with characters I think sometimes I feel a little bit confused by characters' motivations. Like they'll do something and I'll think, well, that's a bit random, or like they'll think something and I'll be like, well, how have we got there? But then once you explain it, or once I think deeper on it, I understand, and I appreciate what Stephen Erickson is trying to do with that character, but it doesn't help me form an emotional connection to them. It's more like I'm distant watching.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference between me and you when it comes to the characters, because obviously when we're discussing characters where we don't get any POVs from, such as like Cultain, Tavor, Dujek and stuff like that, you're relying on the other characters' thoughts in the moment about what they're thinking. Which I think is really interesting, because obviously we get a lot of characters in this book. But for characters like Fiddler, obviously I find the bridge burners just extremely lovable, just because I love that banter, I love the humour. But with Fiddler, there are moments where, as a reader, Erickson creates these moments with the characters which just make me love them so much more. And in book 4, I think I've given you this as an example, when he's talking to Bottle and they're all just around, he's doing this little magic thing where he's overhearing the conversations with Tavor and not Pearl, but the other Claw, Topper, and they talk about the events on Genobacchus and how pretty much all the bridge burners have been decimated and the army's in disarray. And that moment where Bottle just gives out that information, not realising how much of an impact it would be on Fiddler. Yeah. Because I'm not sure if they knew if he was Fiddler or if, because he's obviously strings at that point. And he just gets up and he just walks away without saying absolutely anything. But then, like, from my perspective, I'm understanding how much grief Fiddler's on, because we've had these backstories where obviously they're going through this arduous journey through 7 cities, all of them together. That's where they first met. That's where they're chasing Quick Ben, and they all they form this bond in that moment. And that backstory, that's what allows me to feel so much for this character. And then, but not just that, it's the fact that at that point in time, Fiddler sees another character, one of the Wiccan youths, who's supposed to be the guy in charge, crying on a boulder. And instead of, going his own way to, go through his grief, he decides to help this youth try and, find his way in what he's dealing with. And that just makes me love his character, just to see that, like, those moments of compassion and empathy from these bridge burners, even though they're going through obviously something extremely difficult, not just that event, but the fact that they're in this army, they're traveling through, and he knows, and he's the leader of these Marines for the first time in his life, so he's going through a lot. But I'm like, that's what I'm thinking about when I'm reading these passages, that's always what's on my mind.
I do like Fiddler as a character. I think there's some great moments with him in book 4 where he's become a Marine again because it's all he really knows. And there's some great discussions where he's thinking about retiring and I can't remember who it is he's talking to, who kind of gives him a bit of a reality check.
Yeah, it's Gesler, one of the other OGs.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a bridge burner, but he's an OG Marine.
Basically saying, what was it, like, oh, you're only feeling this way because now you have the responsibility of others.
Like, snap out of it, you know.
Yeah,
get your
like,
together.
This is the thing, I can look at the moments in isolation and think, okay, like, I understand how this is contributing to the character. And I think it's more with hindsight that I look back on certain characters and think, yeah, that was a really interesting exploration of a character.
Yeah, but there was even that moment at the end of book 4 when Fiddler, obviously they were all kind of drawn together in Seven Cities from the song that the Tano Spirit Walker created. And that was the moment right at the end where Fiddler, Kalam and Quick Ben kind of just like hugged it out.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a long moment, it wasn't spread across pages, it was just the moment where they saw each other and then just hugged, and that was it. It was like a fade to black moment.
But you didn't need
any more than that. And I don't think you even saw anything after that, but just that moment as well, just seeing what these characters have actually gone through up to this point, and we're only in book 4 of the series. I feel like Erikson does it really well.
It was because I remember that moment and I did feel a little bit emotional in that moment, but then going back to like Gardens of the Moon, and we obviously saw those characters together, because I was so overwhelmed in Gardens of the Moon with what was going on, I wasn't really feeling the camaraderie. I wasn't really feeling that group dynamic. It wasn't until we were following those characters individually and we followed them over a longer period of time that I started to feel that.
And I think I felt the same way with book 1, because in book 1 you didn't know the backstory of these bridge burners. Erikson hadn't told you about that. You don't know when they'd met. You don't know what they'd been through. You just know that they have been through something. And they've obviously been together for a significant amount of time, and at that point I really liked those characters because, again, I like the back and forth banter, you know. I loved that, and I could see like the connection with them, that they like do anything for each other, even though they were obviously bickering, bantering and stuff and hating on each other, they were still comrades, you know. But I didn't feel an emotional connection up until the point where we got the backstory. We've been to them for like, you know, a significant amount of books, and obviously we're only halfway through the series and we're still not finished with these characters, so I think that's probably still to come. But yeah, there's just moments with Stephen Erikson's character writing which I felt like, even like Tavor, like in book 4, we didn't necessarily have any POVs with her. No. Where we don't really seem to get any POVs with any of the actual people in charge, like Dujek, Coltane, Tavor, Lysine. We don't get any POVs with any of these people. We always just get the sense of what they're feeling from the characters around them, or when Erikson seems to like the facial expressions or things like that. But there was, what I found really tragic in book 4 was when she was having that discussion with Topper, and all these characters and all what we've read and what's been happening to Felisin, to Ganos, and which is what Tavor is like staked her reputation and what has drawn her down this whole path. You know, was for absolutely nothing. You know, if Lysine and Dujek had just talked and discussed what their plans were with Tavor, like, Felisin wouldn't be in the position she would have been in, Tavor wouldn't be in the position she would have been in, like, Ganos wouldn't have been. I just found that really, and just that moment of me thinking, like, what is she thinking at this point? Like, is she just going to go absolutely renegade? Is she not going to follow the what Lysine wants at this point? You know, knowing full well that she wasn't even going to be the one in charge if events and Genabakis went the way that she wanted them to go, because obviously Dujek was supposed to come and relieve her of command. Just those moments, like, that's what builds a character for me. Yeah,
like, it's interesting hearing you talk about that. When you're getting to those moments and you're kind of theorising on what a character might do, you obviously get a lot of enjoyment out of that, whereas I end up feeling a bit confused. Just tell me what they're thinking. I mean, it's a bit different actually with Tavor's a good example. It's a bit different with these characters where we're not getting their POVs. I don't mind speculating when that's the case. It's more when you're inside a character's mind.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And like I say, another one that I love is Tehol and Bug. That banter you get, but I know that Erikson obviously has that dynamic in this book as a comedic relief element, because obviously the book is so melancholy. is quite dark
that
at times,
tone,
but you
yeah.
get that tone shift between chapters where you're just not feeling depressed all the time. You go back to like this, like a bit uplifting, you know, which I think is really well done. But then we get moments with Tehol where he gets serious.
Yeah.
You know, when he's talking to his brother about Hull, about what he's going through right now, about what Tehol is doing for Hull.
Yeah.
Hull doesn't even know about, and that's from Bryce's perspective, that scene. It's not from Tehol's. So even Bryce is like surprised by that, you know, why is he doing all of this? And I find those moments really, really clarifying for me in terms of like talking about the character, because he's not just there for comedic relief. He is a serious character. And it's not just those moments. You get the little bit of Tehol's backstory as well, talked about through Hull and Udnas. You get that like comparison between Tehol and Eberict, the other quote-unquote genius in the city. And and obviously you're comparing them at that point because they're both ascribed to being geniuses, you know, but they're going about things in such a different way. You've got Eberict, this sociopath guy who's just killing all of the, you know, the people that he doesn't want in the city and, you know, chucking them in the river. But then you've got Tehol, who's literally making wealth to try and get all of these other cultures that Lether has conquered out of the city and onto these islands to make them safe. Not only just to protect them, but also for his brother, because he knows that his brother thinks that he's failed them. So that is his only goal. You know, that are the moments I love. And even the fact that when we got Tehol being attacked by the Eater, we had that moment where the guard jumps in front of him and gets stabbed by the spear, and then he looks down at him in sadness and stuff, knowing what he's done for him. And when Chalice turns up, again, a character which you'd really forgotten about. We only got a couple of lines of dialogue from this character between Tehol and him, but then he just comes around the corner, and instead of just running away, you know, in that moment he tries to protect Tehol and gets in front of him and basically says, it's not him, I saw what happened. And he gets killed for that effort. And the first thing Tehol does when he wakes up with Bug is asks about that character, that Chalice guy. And that just, for me, that's what I need when I'm thinking about these characters and what, you know, who they are and what they are.
Shall I tell you my favourite character?
Yeah, go
My
for
favourite
it.
characters so far. Obviously Tehol and Bug, as we've talked about, because that was the first time that Stephen Erickson's humour actually worked for me.
Yeah.
Like, you also talked about the banter with the bridge burners, like that, a lot of that went over my head. Not that I dislike the bridge burners as characters. I think that the longer that we spend with them, the more I kind of am able to see the group dynamic and appreciate how that's been built. I think I'm just not the biggest fan of reading about like Marines and soldiers, you know, that's just a personal thing. I also think Felison as a character, like the more that I think back on her character, because when we were reading Deadhouse Gates, the chapters that we were following with Felison and Heberic, Bowdin, like that group, that was the most interesting thing. Loads of people, every time I like see people talking about Deadhouse Gates, they talk about the Chain of Dogs, which I know you really liked the Chain of Dogs. I actually found a lot of the Chain of Dogs quite boring and a bit of a struggle to get through, but I found myself really invested in Felison's story. You know, this girl from a noble family who is in this horrible situation, and the more that I think on what Stephen Erickson was trying to show with her character, I think, because compassion is such a big theme throughout the entire Malazan series, at least so far, and I think that Felison was where I felt a lot of compassion and empathy for her, and how she's been through this horrible situation where she felt like, you know, she had to sell herself essentially in order to survive, and then the trauma, like that trauma, how it manifests in her, how she's angry and frustrated. She's still only 15, I think, or 16 at the peak of Deadhouse Gates, and how she's lashing out at everyone around her even though they're trying to help her. Like, that is very realistic to how some people experience trauma and how they show trauma. And so I really like, the more I look back on her character, the more I think that it was very well done. Like, her character,
I think
very
so.
raw, you know.
And I think that's what Erickson does really well. He loves a tragic character, and he loves a tragic ending for a character. And that's one, and that is one that is the most tragic that I can think of in this whole series. Not just Felison, there's obviously others, but when she's obviously growing up to hate her sister because she thinks that she's betrayed her.
Yeah.
You know, she's lost all of her family. She's obviously been through this whole traumatic experience, and we know as readers that Tavor has sent Lestara and Pearl off to find her because she sent them there. She sent Felisin to the mines with a protector, but she's obviously lost track of it all, and she's sent a claw and one of the red blades, I think they're called, to try and find her. And we get this moment, obviously, when Felisin is being controlled and being influenced by the Worldbuilding goddess, and all she knows is rage and hatred and stuff like that. But we get moments where that goddess kind of goes.
Yeah.
And right at the end, when she's, you know, covered in armour and Tavor doesn't know it's her, and they come together, the whirlwind god dies and she comes back to herself, and all she's wanting to do is hug her sister at that point and forgive everything, and her sister kills her. I think that's one of the most tragic moments I can think of.
I think the real tragedy, not tragedy, maybe that's the wrong word, but when Pearl and Lestara realise what Tavor has done and they can't bring themselves to tell her, that for me was like, okay, that's actually like a really interesting development, because is she going to find out in the future? They've told her that Felisin, you know, like, has gone. Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting in future books because I'm assuming we're going to see Tavor again.
And I think going off from that, I think what I love about Erikson is that he subverts your expectations really well, and in that particular scenario, we're getting this massive build-up to a battle that's going to commence between the natives and Malazan. Mm-hmm. And we don't get it.
Yeah.
We don't get it. It's this massive build-up, and we actually don't get it.
It's actually a bit anticlimactic, I think.
In that sense, yes. I love how Erikson does that with us as readers, because it's not just that. It's like with Whiskey Jack, for example. You think this character is going to be with you like the whole way, you know.
I didn't.
I did. I was like,
okay. As soon as he started talking about retiring,
I thought that character was going to be with us all the way. But even in the first book, where we see the Malazans fighting this big gothic castle on top of a rock with this, you know, guy with dark long hair with a sword and stuff, I'm thinking, okay, that guy's got to be evil. And that kind of subverted my expectations as well, because initially I thought, okay, so Malazans are the goodies, you know, these other beings are the baddies. But then everything just changes, and that's what I love. There's no like good v evil.
No, there's not.
In this series, you get good and evil on both sides.
And I think it's more characters. Even characters, there's not necessarily... I mean, there's some characters that you root for more than others, but I think that in terms of... that there's no side that you're meant to be rooting for. It's all shades of grey. But I think there are characters that you can really get behind, which I think is necessary.
Absolutely. And even in that chain of dogs, where obviously they're just trying to get to safe harbour. But there are elements within the chain of dogs which are absolutely horrific. The ones that want to keep their power, they want to keep their slaves. I just love that about Erikson's writing. There's just no clear antagonist. There's no clear protagonist.
There's not even a clear main character when you think about it. Like throughout the whole series in each book, there's an ensemble cast, and there's a few characters, usually 4 or 5 sometimes, that have like a bit more prominence. Yeah. But
there's definitely certain POVs which are more touched upon than others. But
you think in most fantasy series you have very clear main characters, but obviously the characters change with each book. And sometimes you'll start a book and it's a whole new cast of characters, and I don't mind that because I feel like
I don't mind that
things interesting
as long as everything's kind of brought forward.
And it's really interesting when you see characters that you followed separately suddenly
appear together,
intersect, like Ikarian and Mappo when they run into Karsa, and it's like
even Fiddler and Crocus and Aspelar.
We had to take a little bit of a break because my camera overheated, but I think we're almost ready to wrap things up. The only other thing I thought it might be worth chatting about is the world building, because that is one of my favourite things about Malazan is the depth of the world. The start of Memories of Ice and also Midnight Tides, those are my two favourite prologues. Is that the right word? Prologues, yeah. I was getting confused with epilogues. No, those are my favourite prologues out of the entire series because they start so far back in the past and it makes you really feel the depth of the history and how presumably some of the history has been lost. You know, there are characters in the present day who were around back then, so they know what happened, but there's other characters who are discovering stuff for the first time, and there's a lot of mystery around there.
Yeah, I think the fact that this world is, at this point, nearly like hundreds of thousands, if not like 1 million years old in terms of the history that we know about, I think is absolutely crazy. But not just like the history, but the amount of races, the amount of cultures, societies, continents, cities, places that Erikson has.
Yeah.
The fact that we literally have, I think, 6 continents. Yeah. And if you look at a map, there's like 100 different city names. Like, it's just the world is massive.
That's one of the things I love about Seven Cities is the way that it was described as civilizations upon civilizations. like these different civilizations that are built on top of the previous civilization. It feels so lived in.
And these ancient like races which have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, like the Telan Imas, the Jagat, the Kachin Chamail, the Tisladur, the Tistandi, the Forkralasail, the Toblakai, all of these different races which have hundreds of thousands of years of history. I just think it's just immense. And
so creative.
And I think, to wrap your head around all of it, I think when you're reading this for the first time, I think is impossible.
It's intense.
It is very, very intense. I think it's a massive success.
So out of the next few books, which is the one that you are most excited to reread, other than The Crippled God is obviously the conclusion, but...
So, for me, when I give a book 5 stars and when I just can't stop talking about it, when I will just tell people this is the best book ever, okay? They're the books which, when I'm reading, there are moments where I just have to put the book down.
Yeah.
Like, I start reading and then I literally I read like a moment and I close the book, put it down, I just walk away.
Yeah.
Because my mind is absolutely just blown away. For me, that did happen technically in Midnight Tides with Mail. The first time round, because the second time round, I picked up on so many hints that I did not pick up. There are so many lines which Erikson gives you all the way through that book, which indicate who Bug is.
Like his snores sound like the ocean.
His snores sound, exactly. Yeah. That in itself is incredible. But that moment for me for Midnight Tides was incredible. The moment in House of Chains when you realise we've met Casa before. Yeah. I did not pick up on that the first time round. I was absolutely mind blown by that. But in terms of those moments, they are there in all of the books, to be fair. Toll the Hounds, there's moments in that book which I absolutely love. I would say the most emotional book, that one that had me absolutely weeping, was Reaper's Gale.
Okay. There's
moments in that book which are incredible. So I'm looking forward to reading Reaper's Gale for those emotional moments, and then there's a moment in Toll the Hounds which I really want to reread because, again, just it will blow your mind.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, but I would say every book, apart from, I would say, Dust of Dreams, and I think a lot of people have problems with Dust of Dreams, I would say every other book in that series I would hope you would enjoy, potentially more so than all the books that you've read so far.
Interesting. I did look at the dramatis personae, like the character list of the next book, and it was really satisfying seeing all of these character names, thinking, I know all of these people. Yeah,
and like I said, I think we've hit that moment where I think we've got most of the characters now, most of the continents. I'd say that yes, there are other continents, but
it's full steam ahead.
In terms of the characters that we've got so far, yeah, I think it is full steam ahead. There are obviously going to be introductions for certain other characters, but nothing like we've seen at this point where we're just on a completely different continent with a completely different set of characters. I don't think that happens again. So you don't need to worry about that. which is good.
Stuff.
So, yeah.
So we're going to be picking up the next book, Bone Hunters, probably towards the end of August, start of September. And you're going to be reading Knight of Knives, is it? Yep, the first Ian Esselman book. Okay.
Yep, that's cool. The first novel of Malazan. That's set between Midnight Tides and Bone Hunters. So I'm looking forward to that one because that does. I don't know. Can I tell you? Like, I can't really tell you.
No, don't tell me, because I might read it at some point. Thank you for joining me. We are gonna leave things here for this video, but we will probably film another video once we've finished the series and do like a follow-up, because this has been really fun. I really enjoyed this. We'll do it again. Right. Thank you everyone for watching. Let us know in the comments any of your thoughts and feelings on this series up until this point, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me. I'll also leave my Malazan playlist linked in the description in case you want to check out any of those, but otherwise I will see you next time. Bye.